Since commercial cattle feeding was relatively new throughout the state and particularly in West Texas, we had to get our story of the potential for feeding cattle told. We had to interest bankers and other lenders in the new feeding ventures. We brought in a number of outside bankers to look us over, and they helped get a giant industry off the ground.
The ability to allow us, the next generation, to do what we love to do, which is raise beef, was set and staged by what you guys set up here. And it's our duty to carry that on to the next generation.
I guess the most significant thing was growth. We were a young organization. Of course, the things we were concerned with were environment, government regulation, trying to set up a marketing network, exchange information.
The day I was born, being involved in this industry, I always knew that we were going to figure it out somehow. And I tell my children all the time that are involved with me in the business, they didn't want to know what the future of the cattle business is. And I keep saying, you know, we're going to have challenges always, and things are going to change. But if we're honest and communicate together and work with Texas cattle feeders, we're going to be fine.
And then during the year, we rolled out two programs that I think TCFA is very proud of, justifiably. One is the work of the Beef Quality Assurance Task Force in their notebook that today still is the role model for other states to use in developing their own quality assurance programs. And the other is the promotion of the TCFA area through our road show called Cattle Feeding Country.
I've always had the belief that if you're going to reap the rewards of an industry, you ought to help put some of the effort into making it great. And today we have challenges, a lot of the same issues, but some new challenges. The volatility that we experience in our futures market is as high as it's ever been, and how we deal with that, how we manage our risk, I think has become a bigger issue than maybe it's even been in the past because of the smaller margins we deal with.
We had pretty well established ourselves as a viable association. 72, my first year, why things were going along pretty good. In 73, we had some Washington interference with a price ceiling that disrupted our whole damn market situation.
Lots of bad things were happening. I saw cattle in Friona that probably weighed 1,800. Most of them controlled by one guy, and he was waiting on the market to turn. It didn't turn very quick.
It was another solid year of profits. The market stayed up for the entire year. And rather than fighting wars, it was a time of being able to try to maybe mend fences and bring the industry together.
I see one of the positive aspects of my year as chairman was the work that we did with the millennial generation. We all know that there's a generation there that thinks and works and is just a little bit different than what we're used to, and we engaged the millennial generation. We created the Millennial Task Force.
During my tenure, we were waiting sometimes 10 days for the packers to pick up the cattle after they bought them, and we were shrinking them 5%, and then we was waiting 10 days to get our money. So we went to the packers and stockyards and lobbied them to change that to where packers pay for slaughter cattle the next business day.
The Texas Cattle Feeders has been a godsend to members and owners of the feedlot business in the Panhandle, because it's been a very, very respected and a very responsible advocate for the cattle feeding industry.
Checkoff dollars started in 1986, and by October of 1987, the checkoff had collected about $76 million. So in fact, on a national basis, we felt like we did have enough money to do some good.
There were a few significant things. I mean, we were worried about what the regulators were doing to us. I mean, they were kind of going wild. We had certainly a much closer scrutiny of all of our environmental and animal practices going on from both the EPA, the USDA, and the FDA was trying to figure out what their role was in regulating animal agriculture. Felt like we're getting attacked from all sides. The blessing in all this, of course, was the fact that we were selling fat cattle for, I think it got up to as high as $1.74.
There's nothing static about the cattle feeding industry, as most of you know, and TCFA has continued to work for your interests during the past 2 years in some ways that are obvious and in many ways that are seldom seen by members. We have initiated a number of new services and improved others, all aimed at assuring a better future in the cattle feeding business.
Needless to say, this has been a historic year for the cattle industry. We have witnessed the merger of the National Cattlemen's Association and the National Livestock and Meat Board into the National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
We decided that we weren't going to put up with the second dairy legislation. Found out, in fact, that the dairy herd buyout was going to be crammed down our throats. And we went to Washington. We did at least establish a presence in Washington like Bob was talking about.
We have to prove to other people that we have their best interest at heart. I mean, we want to make wholesome food. We want to feed the world. We want to take care of our world, because we can't just say that anymore. Now we have to demonstrate it.
79, I think the most significant thing that I can remember that stands out in my mind was the $25 or $27 price swing that we had. When I took office, we had about a $42 or $3 market. And when I left office in 79, I think we had hit the magic $70 figure. And when that $500,000 was raised, it opened a lot of eyes throughout the country. And that was raised almost overnight, in a matter of a couple of 3 days. And it was a shock to all of us. To see that happen opened up the horizon out there, not only what could be done, but what needed to be done. It was going to have to be done if we were going to play a part in the future of the cattle industry.
The industry today, from when the industry that I was first started out in, is very different, but it's also very similar. The issues are pretty similar from what they were before.
TCFA took the lead, put their money up, hired these people, and said, we're going to be in Washington and we're going to be represented as the cattle industry should. What I think 85 was the real turning point for cattlemen to really put their money where their mouth was. And we did it, and I think it helped the whole industry.
I can recall, as chairman, the toughest project that we worked on would probably be country of origin labeling. 95% of the population of the world lived outside of the United States. We had to get our exports going, and we did. And then we come along with country of origin labeling, which was contrary to that belief. It was a big battle, carried on quite a while, and through the efforts of TCFA and national organization, I think we've probably jumped the hurdle there.
I would imagine that a meeting in a hotel room in Dallas with the presidents of Texas and Southwestern, Texas Farm Bureau, and the Independent Cattlemen Association, and myself, to get a 25-cent a head checkoff started in the state of Texas to fund what is now the Beef Industry Council, was a step in the right direction.
But you know what? For the long term, I'm very optimistic, because I've seen this industry when it was down. And I know how strong and resilient the people are, how they can unite to address the problems. I've said all year long, one thing we have in our favor is the quality of the people in this industry, their pride, their guts, and their integrity.
We have to have the ability for the cattle feeder to have a profitable future, a future that he can look to and know that we're going to be a viable industry.
We took our fed cattle markets to an all-time high. We hit an $81 market in April of 1990, but I think the most significant thing is, on a correction phase, when we broke that market back, the low of that year was 74.5. So it was a $6.50 swing from the high to the low, and that was the smallest decrease in market from a dollar standpoint that we had seen any year previous to that.
I was 2011 chairman. Of course, that administration came into being in 2008. And man, the wraps came off of those agencies. And they began to do things that you couldn't imagine.
The long-term survival of our industry depends on whether or not we can stand side by side and work together to enhance the industry with our efficiencies instead of capitalizing on each other's deficiencies.
In Texas, the 25% per head checkoff to the Beef Industry Council is generating more than $100,000 per month. This has allowed the BIC to launch one of the most extensive beef promotion campaigns on record.
The one thing I know about the cattle business today is that it has totally changed. What was true 40 or 50 years ago is no longer true.
The most profitable operations are the most efficient operations. So we use every bit of technology we can, every bit of animal husbandry, every bit of maintenance that we can on this feed yard, every bit of environmentally sound practices to try to produce more beef with the least amount of resources.
Things change. Our topics back whenever I was there was captive supply. There was all sorts of things that we needed to do and a lot of votes being taken. Those things are going to change. The owner-operator, we got to learn to live with smaller margins. We don't have the margins that we used to have. And whenever you make a misstep, which we do, it seems today it tears your head off. You just can't hardly afford to take a very big misstep. And 2016 was a pretty good lesson there.
There were no dynamic mammoth events, and mostly that happened because the staff was managing rather than crisis managing. And so what happened is they were working well with the different regulatory agencies. They were working well in Congress, and a lot of things that could have hurt us were stopped before they came about.
So when I took office, we were coming off a great year of 2003. It looked like I was going to have a pretty easy job as chairman of Texas Cattle Feeders until the morning of December 23rd, when the industry found out about mad cow disease, a positive BSE cow in the United States. When I was asked how bad it was going to be and whether this was going to be the end of the cattle feeding business as we know it, I told them that there's no way. We're so resilient, and we'll get through this as we've gotten through so many other things in the past.
The issues we faced when I was chairman was ethanol, cool, animal ID. Those were kind of the issues we faced.
Of course, the highlight so far for me is to be president during the 25th year. They say a boy becomes a man at the age of 25, and I think this association has grown into manhood.
Perhaps few of you remember the dairy herd buyout. I woke up one morning, I was short about $7 million, and so hell, that was the first time I went to Washington myself.
Probably one of the hardest things that we did, Charlie and I spent an awful lot of time in Washington, D.C., because probably one of the strongest pushes at that time by Congress to do away with prepaid feed and the cash basis of accounting. We spent an awful lot of time that year working on that and managed to put it off.
You know, it's a pretty good responsibility just to produce food and fiber for the population. Then when they added fuel in there, that created a more competitive situation for food and fiber.
When I was chairman, we had Katrina, and during Katrina, we had an emergency meeting here at the association and decided to send feed and get a group together to send feed to these fellow cattlemen. One of the things that I remember that was so moving about it was at the NCBA convention following Katrina, a group from Louisiana sought me out at the convention to thank me.
The market dropped. We were above that magic $70 level in the spring. The market dropped from 72 to 58 by September. So I went out on a sour note.
And we have begun to turn around the demand for beef. We have turned around the demand for beef. We can make real progress because what we have is a really superb product. It's easy to fix, and it's delicious to eat, and it's nutritious, and it's good for you, and we've got a great message to tell. We're getting it told.
The most significant opportunity as an industry we have today is in exports. That represents the greatest growth potential in our industry going forward, and it has for a lot of years. So our challenge is to make sure that we can negotiate trade agreements that will allow us to expand beyond the demographics in the United States.
Most of us that are sitting here today, and I guess all of us, have had an opportunity to help develop an industry which very few people in their lifetime have that opportunity. And I think we've done a good job.